We now turn to the analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good afternoon, fellows. Craig, I guess I was a bit surprised to see how quickly there was a consensus with Republican senators to move forward with a Supreme Court nominee to replace Justice Ginsburg before the election. Even our SPY poll shows that most of our readers were against Trump making that move. But in your op-ed today in the SPY, you thought this was the right move to make. Can you outline some of your thinking on that?
Well, I got to that point of view because ultimately, I guess I think that people ought to step up and do the right thing, whatever they determine the right thing to be. And when it comes to a president, we really shouldn't be asking them to make important decisions for only 3.5 of their 4-year term, or 3 years and 8 months of their 4-year term. They get the opportunity to do what they think is best during the entire 4 years. And so in this case, if in President Trump's view, he wants to move quickly to fill a Supreme Court justice vacancy, that I think you ought to do that. Likewise, I think the Senate has the responsibility to do what they think is best. And there, I think it gets a little more complicated. They have the obligation to review the merits of a nominee and determine whether that person is qualified. Ultimately, when each senator casts his or her vote, we don't know what's entirely behind that. Theoretically, it has to do with the appropriateness of the justice that's been nominated. If the Senate were to decide that this was moving too fast and they wanted to wait until late this year or early next year or for the next president, that's their right to do that, and they could slow that down. But the majority in the Senate has indicated they're prepared to go forward. I think it's important that people like Mitt Romney say he wants to go forward to bring this to the floor for a vote. He hasn't kind of blanketed, embraced the nominee before they even know who the nominee is. And so I guess, we'll see what happens. I thought Obama, by the way, was right to make a nomination late in his second term. So my view's been consistent on these. Politically, it's a little more complicated, I think. The reality today is you've got a large block of voters who are going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what he does, and a large block of voters who are going to vote against him and for Joe Biden no matter what happens. It's those in the middle that we really, should be most interested in. And the point I kind of came to in the piece that appears in the SPY today, and is that actually success for Donald Trump in both nominating and getting confirmed a Supreme Court nominee may actually politically be damaging. In that, those Republicans who are troubled by voting for Trump and are inclined to vote for Biden often say that their concern is, though, that would the Democrats have a chance to stack the court with more liberal justices? So the fact that Donald Trump gets a last shot at this, if he were to be successful, I think it gives people who are Republicans leaning towards Biden a little more comfort in crossing over and voting that way. And from a Democrat standpoint, the Democrats, I'm not sure many Democrats are going to cross over for Trump, but certainly some are wondering, what are the stakes in voting at all? They're not that enthusiastic about their nominee. If they see this Republican president late in his first term put another person, another judge on the bench, they may say to themselves, well, that's enough, and come out and vote. So the calculation in my mind is not at all clear that success for Trump is a political plus. But I think this is all going to end up with the Senate trying to work very quickly against the clock that's rapidly moving towards a conclusion on them to see if they can confirm his nomination, which of course he's yet to actually make.
Al?
Well, first of all, I don't share Craig's confidence. and faith in those paragons of honor and virtue of Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and Lindsey Graham to do the right thing for the country. What I really, look, you can find a precedent for anything you want to do. In this case, Trump will prove that once again, that he's no Lincoln, because Lincoln had the same choice and he decided to wait until after the election during a time of division, probably a little more division than we have now, but we're getting there. And Trump obviously has the power to appoint whoever he wants. My question is whether the Senate wants to even do more to damage its reputation as a deliberative body. We already have that paragon of virtue, Lindsey Graham, whose word seems to last as long as Donald Trump's, out in saying he has the votes. At the same time, of course, there's a tape of him telling Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic that in October of 2018, not a long time ago, after the last nominee was confirmed, that if a vacancy occurred in Trump's last year, that he would let the next president decide. And he said, keep the tape, hold me to my word. Well, maybe the voters of South Carolina will. But with all that, the real issue to me is whether we deliberate on the consequences of this nominee. And what's happening now is what I would call the last hurrah of the coalition of the 1950s. I mean, what's happened in this country is over the last 20 or 25, 30 years, we've had enormous change. When Craig and I were in politics, 90% of the electorate was white. Now it's 70%. Trump's nominee will be the third by a president nominated by Trump who did not win the popular vote, lost it significantly, and will be confirmed by senators who will represent less than 45% of the country. And that's going to get more, those diversions are going to be even greater. If Trump will almost undoubtedly lose the popular vote in this election, that'll make it 7 out of the last 8 times the Democrat has won the popular vote, but it's entirely conceivable that this will be the 3rd time out of those 8 that a president will be elected by the Electoral College. And the consequences of that, I think, are pretty great. I mean, it seems to me what's happening is the country's changing. The Democratic Party represents, and this hasn't always been the case, incidentally, historically, but it represents the vanguard of that change. The Republican Party now represents the rear guard. The country is less white and less Christian, but the states where the Republican senators that can confirm this nominee, whoever she is, represent states that are most white, most Christian, changing less than than the rest of the country. And the last time we've had this kind of divergence where the court sort of the rear guard was in the 1850s, and I don't want to say that the consequences were not good. We'll get over this, and Trump probably will get his justice, and Lord knows it may turn out that she will be what Earl Warren was to Eisenhower, but probably not. But in any event, I think this is a real threat to the institutions, and especially because it is likely if we voted in January, there'd be a Democratic Senate and that represented far more than a big majority of the American people.
Now, let me stay with you, because the other side of it is the political challenge this poses to the Biden campaign, does it not?
I think Biden's doing fine in his response. He's basically tried to keep the focus on the consequences of this nominee for the country and American people. Look, this election has been a referendum on Trump so far. And as long as it stays that way, Trump's not is gonna lose. And that is why he's done everything in the world to try to divert attention. I mean, he's called Biden all sorts of names. He's made up all sorts of phony stories. He lies every day about what's going on. He's tried to divide the country. He's tried to incite riots. You know, he's done everything he can to try to change the subject. And now he's got a gift. Because, you know, the Supreme Court's pretty important, and a Supreme Court confirmation hearing a nominee will, you know, take a lot of attention. So what, and it will probably divert some attention from the fact that we've passed the 200,000 mark in deaths for the coronavirus and all the other stuff that's going on. So what Biden needs to do is continue that focus on the consequences of Trump getting his nominee. He's got to remind people that on November 10th, there's going to be a case that the Trump administration has brought to end Obamacare and pre-existing conditions in the middle of a pandemic. You know, there are consequences. He's got to remind people that at a time that racial divisions and inequality are a major issue in the country, he's probably going to appoint a justice who's going to try to hold the line, and, you know, that not going to be particularly favorable to voting rights and issues like that. He's got to remind women in the suburbs that reproductive rights, and incidentally, their male companions, that reproductive rights may be on the line. So that's, to me, that's what Biden has to do. And then he just needs to get back to the main point of this election. What he's done a pretty good job, that Trump's mismanagement of this pandemic has cost us tens of thousands of lives that were avoidable, deaths that were avoidable. It's cost tens of millions of jobs. It's resulted in every family, or most young families, being disrupted because their kids can't go back to school. It's divided the country. And, you know, he's got to say, do you want a president who's had that kind of record appointing another justice? We have a debate coming up next week. And the American people, I believe, have decided they want to fire Donald Trump. Now, what Biden has to do in that debate is convince them that he's the guy they need to hire.
Craig, what's your thought?
You know, this brings to mind the saying that when you see somebody digging themselves into a hole, you just stand back and let them keep digging. I do actually think this gets more complicated from the Republicans' side all the time. They're going to have a nominee, presumably. There's going to be a huge uproar and floods of information about that nominee. Some of it will not be attractive. That's just the course we go through. I think if I was advising, and I am not, the Biden campaign, I might put out before that upcoming debate that Al referred to, I might put out my list of 5 potential nominees for the Supreme Court and say, if I was elected, here's the group of 5 that I would select from. And here's the contrast between my choice and choices and President Trump's, and let people decide. Again, I think that on the extreme, or on the people that have already made up their mind, it doesn't have much impact. On the people that are in the middle, frustrated Republicans, I'm sure, are curious as to what kind of nominee Biden might put out there, and it might be helpful to them. This is certainly going to be dramatic over the course of the next few weeks, that's for sure.
Fuller, Al Fromm, thanks a lot.